My son hadn't taken a single step in 7 years. Not one. And I had accepted that. I had built my whole life around caring for him, around that wheelchair, around that silence. But the morning his wife drove away with her suitcase, something shifted in that house. The air felt different. And then I heard it. A sound I thought I would never hear again. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming down the hallway. I turned around, and my coffee cup slipped right out of my hand. He was standing, looking straight at me, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Mom, we need to go, right now." I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my coat and followed him. Because something in his eyes told me that everything I thought I knew was about to fall apart. My name is Robert. I'm 64 years old, and for the past 7 years, the hardest thing I have ever done is watch my son suffer and feel completely powerless to stop it. My son Daniel was 39 when the accident took his legs. A truck ran a red light on a cold November morning, and in the space of 1 second, everything changed. For him and for me. I retired early to help. I sold the house I had lived in for 30 years and moved into the spare room of Daniel's home because that is what fathers do. You don't calculate the cost, you just show up. His wife Renee seemed grateful at first. She smiled, she thanked me, she said she didn't know what they would do without me. I believed her, I wanted to believe her, because the alternative, that something was quietly wrong inside that house, was a thought I wasn't ready to sit with yet. Welcome to Dad's True Revenge. Where are you watching from today? And if this story already has your attention, go ahead and subscribe. You are going to want to stay for what comes next. Renee was the kind of woman who knew exactly how to appear devoted. She kept the house looking right. She spoke about Daniel with concern in her voice whenever neighbors or friends came around, and she always made sure he looked cared for when eyes were on them. People respected her for it. More than once, someone told me I should be grateful my son had a woman like her by his side, and I would nod, I would agree, because I am not a man who speaks without certainty, and back then I had feelings but no facts. But I was watching. Quietly, the way fathers do. I noticed she checked her phone constantly but always turned the screen away when I walked into the room. I noticed she volunteered for every errand, every outside task, any reason to leave the house. And I noticed the way she looked at Daniel when she thought no one was paying attention. Not with love, not even with duty, but with a cold, distant kind of tolerance. Like she was waiting for something. It was a Tuesday when she announced she was leaving for a week. Said she needed to visit an old friend in Portland. No real explanation, no guilt in her voice. She packed her bag the night before, set her alarm for early, and by 7 in the morning she was reversing out of the driveway like she couldn't get out fast enough. I stood at the front window and watched until her car was completely out of sight, then I turned around. Daniel was at the kitchen table, both hands flat on the surface, staring at nothing. I poured us both a coffee and sat across from him. I didn't ask questions right away, I just sat with him the way I had learned to do over these 7 years. Present, quiet, not pushing. After a long while he looked up at me and said, "Dad, some things are going to come out this week." I set my mug down slowly. I looked at my son's face, and I said, "Then I'm right here." He nodded once, and then he looked back down at his hands and said nothing more. That evening I made dinner and we ate together without much conversation. Daniel seemed somewhere else in his mind. Present in body but distant in thought, the way a man gets when he is carrying something too heavy to put into words just yet. After we ate, I washed the dishes and he sat nearby, and at one point I caught him staring at his own legs with an expression I could not fully read. Not sadness exactly, something more like concentration. Like he was having a conversation with them that I wasn't meant to hear. I didn't say anything. Around 9 I told him I was heading to bed and asked if he needed anything before I went. He said no, he thanked me, and then, just as I reached the hallway, he said my name. I turned around, he was looking straight at me and he said, "I need you to trust me tomorrow morning, Dad. Whatever happens, just trust me." I held his gaze for a moment. Then I said, "I always have, son." I went to my room but I barely slept a minute. I was up before the sun. I put the kettle on and stood in the kitchen in the early gray quiet, turning his words over in my mind. Whatever happens, just trust me. I had no idea what that meant. I only knew it sat in my chest like a stone. I poured my coffee and leaned against the counter, watching the hallway. And then I heard it. A sound that stopped every thought in my head completely. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, unmistakable footsteps coming down the hall. Not wheels. Not the familiar rhythm I had lived with for 7 years. Actual steps, one after another. I put my mug down. My hands were not steady. Daniel appeared in the kitchen doorway, standing upright on his own 2 feet, no wheelchair, no support, looking at me with the clearest eyes I had seen on him in years. I could not speak. He walked toward me, stopped close, and said in a voice that was completely calm, "Dad, we need to go to the harbor, right now." I didn't ask him how. I didn't ask him when. A father sees his son standing after 7 years, and the questions can wait. Everything can wait. I grabbed my coat off the hook by the door, found my keys on the counter, and followed him outside into the cold morning air without a single word. He moved carefully but steadily, one hand briefly touching the porch railing as we descended the steps, and then he was walking on his own across the driveway toward my truck. I watched every step like a man watching something he was afraid would disappear if he blinked. We got in. I started the engine. The harbor was about 12 minutes from the house and neither of us spoke for the entire drive. The roads were empty that early. The sky was still that pale, colorless gray that comes just before real daylight. I kept my eyes forward, but I could feel Daniel sitting rigid beside me, jaw set, hands on his knees, staring straight ahead like a man preparing himself for something he had been building toward for a very long time. The harbor parking lot was nearly empty when we pulled in. One old fishing truck at the far end. A few birds cutting low across the water. The kind of stillness that feels less like peace and more like the moment just before something breaks open. Daniel got out before I had fully stopped, and I followed him down toward the dock, the cold salt air hitting my face immediately. He walked ahead of me, still steady, still deliberate, and I stayed close without crowding him. He stopped at a spot near the far end of the main pier and stood looking out at the water. I came up beside him and stood there too, saying nothing, waiting. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He held it for a moment without unlocking it. Then he looked at me sideways and said, "How long have you suspected something was wrong, Dad?" "Long enough." He nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "Then what I'm about to show you won't destroy you." He handed me the phone. On the screen was a photograph. I want to be careful here because I am not a man who dramatizes pain. I have lived too long for that. But I will tell you that what I saw on that screen required me to take a slow breath and look away for a moment before I could look back. It was Renee. At the harbor, at this exact harbor, standing close to a man I had never seen before, her hand in his, both of them looking out at the water the way couples do when they believe no one is watching. The timestamp on the photo was from 4 months ago. Daniel said quietly, "There are more." He scrolled slowly and let me look at each one without rushing me. 6 photographs in total, different days, same man, same ease between them that only comes from time and familiarity. I handed the phone back without a word. The cold off the water felt sharper suddenly. I put my hands in my coat pockets and stood very still. And I thought about every smile she had given me, every thank you, every performance. I asked him how long he had known. He said 8 months. 8 months he had been carrying this alone, sitting in that wheelchair, living in that house, watching her come and go, watching me trust her, saying nothing. I turned to look at him then, really look at him, and I saw something in his face that broke something in me quietly. Not weakness, the opposite, the kind of stillness that only comes from a man who has made a decision and is completely at peace with it. I asked him why he hadn't told me sooner. He said, "Because I needed to be standing when I did." And there it was, 7 years in a wheelchair, and my son had been working in secret, privately, quietly, without telling anyone, not even me, rebuilding what the accident had taken. He told me he had been doing private physical therapy for 14 months, paying for it from a personal account she didn't know existed, training alone in his room at night while I slept and she slept, getting stronger in silence, waiting. I had to look away again. I was not going to cry at a harbor at 6 in the morning, but it was close. I asked him what he wanted to do. He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the water, and then he said something I have thought about every single day since. He said, "I don't want revenge, Dad. I want truth. I want everything out in the open, clean and clear, so that whatever comes next is built on something real." I stood beside my son in the cold morning air and I felt something shift inside my chest. Something that had been tight and guarded for years slowly releasing. Because that right there was the boy I raised. Not the anger, not the bitterness, not the broken man that house had been slowly trying to make him. The real one. The one who thought before he acted. The one who planned. He put his phone back in his pocket and turned to face me fully, standing on those legs that everyone had written off 7 years ago, and he said, "But truth has consequences, Dad, and I need you beside me when they land." I looked at my son, I put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, "Where else would I be?" We drove home in a different kind of silence than the one we left in. That first silence had been heavy, loaded, full of things unsaid. This one was quieter in a different way. The silence of two men who understand each other completely and don't need to fill the air to prove it. Daniel sat beside me with his hands relaxed on his knees now, looking out the window at the town waking up around us. Normal people, normal mornings, coffee shops opening, a man walking his dog, life moving forward the way it always does, completely unaware of what was shifting inside our small corner of it. When we got home, Daniel went to his room, and I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee I never touched. I looked around that kitchen, at the refrigerator covered in photos Renee had arranged, at the neat countertops she maintained, at the small decorative signs about family and home that she had hung on the walls. Everything curated, everything presented. A life that looked exactly right from the outside and meant something entirely different from the inside. I thought about how long a lie can live inside a house before the walls start to feel it. Later that morning, Daniel came back to the kitchen and sat across from me. He had a folder with him, a plain brown folder, the kind you buy at any office supply store. And he set it on the table between us without opening it. He said, "I have been documenting everything for 6 months." I looked at the folder, I looked at him. He said it calmly, without anger, the way a man speaks when he has had a long time to process his own pain and come out the other side of it clear-headed. Inside that folder were printed photographs, phone records he had requested through legal channels, bank statements showing transfers to an account she had opened without his knowledge, and 2 signed statements from people who had seen them together. He had done this methodically, carefully, without confrontation, without tipping his hand once. I turned the pages slowly. My son had not been sitting in that wheelchair doing nothing. He had been building a case, quietly, patiently, with the kind of precision that only comes from a man who has learned the hard way that timing matters more than impulse. I closed the folder and looked up. "You have a lawyer?" I asked. He said, "I have had one for 3 months." The lawyer's name was Patricia Hale. Daniel had found her through a friend of a friend, someone who specialized in exactly this kind of case: asset protection, divorce proceedings, financial misconduct. He had been meeting with her quietly, scheduling appointments during the hours when Renee was out of the house and I was running errands or at the grocery store. He told me this without apology, and I didn't want one. I was not hurt that he had kept it from me. I understood. Some things a man has to build alone before he can let anyone else see them. Patricia had already filed preliminary paperwork. The moment Renee had driven away on Tuesday morning, a process had quietly begun that Renee knew absolutely nothing about. Daniel explained it to me in plain language. The house was in his name only, purchased before the marriage. The savings account she had been drawing from without discussion had already been legally frozen pending review. I set both hands flat on the table and exhaled slowly. "She has no idea," I said. It wasn't a question. Daniel looked at me steadily and said, "None, and she won't. Not until she walks back through that front door." Renee called that afternoon. Daniel answered on speaker without telling her I was in the room. Her voice was bright, easy, relaxed. The voice of a woman who believed everything at home was exactly as she had left it. She asked how he was feeling. He said fine. She asked if he needed anything. He said no. She mentioned the weather in Portland was beautiful and that her friends sent her love. Daniel responded to every single thing she said with the right words, the right tone, perfectly measured warmth that gave away absolutely nothing. I sat across from him and watched my son perform a calmness I knew was costing him something, and I felt a complicated pride rise in my chest, the kind that comes mixed with grief, because no father wants his child to ever need a skill like that. When she hung up, Daniel set the phone on the table and was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She sounds happy, not angry, not bitter, just observing it, the way you observe the weather." I said, "That's because she thinks she's safe." Daniel nodded slowly. He picked up his coffee, and he said, "She has 4 more days. Those 4 days were the strangest of my life. On the outside, the house ran exactly as it always had. I cooked. Daniel rested when he needed to and moved carefully around the house on his own, still keeping his recovery private, still not ready for the world to know. We watched television in the evenings, we ate at the table, we talked about ordinary things. But underneath all of it ran a current that never switched off, a low, constant hum of awareness that everything in this house was about to change permanently. On the 3rd evening, Daniel asked me something I hadn't expected. He said, "Are you angry at her, Dad?" I thought about it honestly before I answered. I said, "I'm angry at what she did to you, but mostly I'm angry at the years." He looked at me and waited. I said, 7 years of watching you in that chair, blaming the accident, blaming life, when part of what was keeping you down was living inside a lie." Daniel was quiet for a long time after that. Then he said softly, "That's exactly it, Dad. That's exactly what it was." And something about hearing him say that, about him finally naming it out loud, made the air in that house feel, for the first time in years, just slightly easier to breathe. The morning of the 7th day arrived like any other. Gray sky, cold air, the smell of coffee moving through the house before the sun had fully decided to show up. I was at the kitchen table when Daniel came in, walking, steady, unhurried, and sat across from me without a word. We both knew what today was. Renee was due back sometime in the afternoon, no specific time given, just a casual message the night before saying she would be home by dinner. Daniel had his phone face up on the table, the folder was in his room, Patricia Hale was reachable. Everything was in position. I asked him how he slept. He said better than he had in months. I believed him. There was something different about his face that morning. Not hard, not cold, but settled. The way a man looks when he has stopped dreading something and simply accepted that it is coming. We ate breakfast together slowly. We did the dishes side by side, and at one point Daniel stopped, looked out the kitchen window at the driveway and said quietly, "Whatever she says when she walks in, let me handle it, Dad." I dried my hands on the dish towel. I said, "It's your house, son. Always has been." She pulled into the driveway at 4:30. I heard the car first, that familiar engine, the crunch of tires on the gravel, and I saw Daniel's jaw tighten slightly before he deliberately relaxed it. He was sitting in his wheelchair when she came through the door. That was a choice. He had made it that morning without explaining it to me, and I understood immediately. He was not ready to show her what he had rebuilt. Not yet. Not like this. Renee came in with her bag over her shoulder, a shopping bag in one hand, and that bright, practiced smile already in place. She said she had missed them both. She set her things down, came over and kissed Daniel on the cheek, then turned and gave me a brief hug that felt exactly as hollow as every hug she had ever given me. She moved into the kitchen and started talking. About Portland, about her friend, about a restaurant they had visited, about the drive home. A full, detailed, completely constructed story delivered without a single pause. I stood in the doorway and watched my son watch her. His face gave away nothing. He was remarkable. He asked one question, just one. He said, "Did you get any time to yourself while you were there?" She smiled and said, "A little." He nodded and said nothing more. Dinner that evening was the most unusual meal I have ever sat through in my life. Renee cooked pasta, garlic bread, the kind of meal designed to feel like an apology without being one. She talked through most of it, filling every silence before it could grow into something uncomfortable. Daniel ate and responded and asked small questions and behaved in every way like a man who was simply glad to have his wife home. I said very little. I focused on my plate and occasionally looked up when spoken to, and kept my expression as neutral as I could manage. At one point, Renee looked at me across the table and said, "You've been quiet tonight, Robert." I looked back at her and said, "Just tired." She accepted that and moved on. After dinner, she cleared the plates and suggested they watch something together, and Daniel agreed, and the three of us sat in the living room like an ordinary family on an ordinary evening. I watched a program I could not have named 5 minutes after it ended. My mind was somewhere else entirely, and across the room I could see by the stillness in Daniel's hands that his was too. It happened the following morning. Renee came downstairs in her robe, relaxed, unhurried, expecting another ordinary day. Daniel was already at the kitchen table. The folder was in front of him, closed. His phone was beside it, screen down. I was standing at the counter with my coffee and I did not move when she walked in. She noticed the folder first. Just a brief glance, the kind you try to make look casual but isn't. She poured herself a coffee, turned around and leaned against the counter. She looked at Daniel and said, "What's that?" He looked up at her. And for the first time in that entire week, for the first time in perhaps years, he dropped every layer of careful composure and looked at her with complete, unguarded honesty. Not anger, not cruelty, just truth, sitting right there on his face with nowhere left to hide. He said, "Sit down, Renee." She didn't move immediately. Her eyes went from the folder to his face to me and back again. I saw the exact moment she understood that something had fundamentally changed, a flicker, fast as a blink, there and gone. Then she pulled out a chair and sat down. The kitchen was completely silent. Daniel opened the folder, and he began. He spoke for 20 minutes without raising his voice once. He laid everything out, the photographs, the phone records, the bank statements, the timeline reconstructed month by month with a precision that left no room for alternative explanation. He did not editorialize. He did not accuse beyond what the documents already proved. He simply presented the truth, piece by piece, the way a man does when he has had a very long time to decide exactly how this moment would go. Renee said nothing for the first several minutes. Her coffee sat untouched in front of her. At one point she opened her mouth and closed it again. At another point, she looked at me, I think hoping I might offer something, some softness, some familiar comfort, and I held her gaze steadily and gave her nothing, because this was not my moment to fill. When Daniel finished, he closed the folder and folded his hands on top of it and waited. The silence stretched. Then Renee said, very quietly, "How long have you known?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Long enough to make sure you couldn't take anything with you when you left." And there it was, not a threat, not a performance. Just the truth finally after all this time. Sitting in the open air of that kitchen where it had always belonged, Renee tried 3 things in that kitchen and none of them worked. First she tried denial, a brief, almost reflexive attempt to reframe what the photographs showed, to suggest context that wasn't there, to question the timestamps. Daniel let her finish without interrupting. Then he turned his phone toward her and played a short audio recording. A conversation she had no idea existed, her own voice, clear and unmistakable, saying things that made denial impossible. She stopped talking immediately. Then she tried guilt. She brought up his accident, his recovery, the years she had spent in that house, the sacrifices she claimed to have made. I felt something tighten in my chest during that part. But Daniel did not flinch. He said quietly and without emotion, "I know what those years cost you, and I know you stopped paying that cost a long time ago." That landed. I could see it land. Then she tried tears. And I want to be fair here. I cannot tell you with certainty whether those tears were real or constructed. What I can tell you is that Daniel looked at them the same way he had looked at everything else that morning. Clearly, steadily, without being moved from where he stood. He reached into the folder one final time and placed a single document in front of her. Divorce papers. Already prepared. Already signed by him. She left the kitchen and went upstairs. We could hear her moving around up there, drawers opening, the closet, footsteps back and forth across the bedroom floor. Daniel stayed at the kitchen table. He didn't follow her. He didn't pace. He simply sat with both hands resting on the closed folder and looked out the window at the backyard. The old oak tree, the winter garden, the fence he and I had repaired together 3 summers ago. Before everything. I refilled his coffee without being asked and set it beside him, and he thanked me without looking away from the window. After about 40 minutes, Renee came back downstairs with 2 bags. She had changed out of her robe. Her face was composed now. Whatever had broken through in the kitchen had been packed away again, sealed back behind that familiar, controlled surface. She stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at Daniel. He turned to look at her. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then she said, "I never wanted it to end like this." Daniel held her gaze. He said, "Neither did I." And that was true. I could hear the truth of it in his voice, the real grief underneath the steadiness, the loss of what this marriage was supposed to have been. But truth doesn't change truth. She walked out the front door, and this time, neither of us watched her go. The house was different after she left. Not lighter exactly. Grief doesn't work that simply, but more honest somehow. Like a room where someone has finally opened the windows after a very long winter. Daniel and I sat in that kitchen for a long time without speaking, and it was the most comfortable silence I could remember sharing with him in years. Eventually I asked him how he was feeling. He thought about it genuinely before answering, the way he always has since he was a boy. Never reaching for the easy answer, always finding the real one. He said, sad, relieved, and very, very tired. I nodded. I understood all 3 completely. I told him he didn't have to figure out the next step today. He said he knew that. Then he looked at me and said something I want to remember for the rest of my life. He said, "Dad, the worst part of these 7 years wasn't the wheelchair. It wasn't the pain or the therapy or the limitations. It was feeling like I was disappearing inside my own life and nobody could see it." I set my coffee down. I looked at my son, and I said, "I see you, Daniel. I always have." He looked down at the table, and for the first time since this whole thing began, he let himself cry. So did I. Tell me honestly, what would you have done in Daniel's position? The weeks that followed were quiet in a way that felt earned rather than empty. Patricia Hale moved efficiently through the legal process. The house remained Daniel's. The frozen accounts were reviewed and settled in his favor, and the documentation Daniel had so carefully assembled made the proceedings straightforward in ways that left very little room for dispute. Renee retained her own lawyer, but the case, as Patricia had predicted from the beginning, was not a complicated one. Daniel walked into every meeting with that same steady composure he had carried through the kitchen confrontation, present, clear, unhurried. I drove him to most of those appointments and waited in the parking lot with my coffee and my thoughts. Sometimes he came out looking drained, sometimes he came out looking lighter. Always, by the time we reached the car, he was already looking forward rather than back. His physical therapy moved into a new phase now, openly, properly, with a full medical team who expressed genuine astonishment at what he had achieved privately over 14 months. His lead therapist told him that the determination required to do what he had done, alone and in secret, was something she had encountered perhaps twice in her entire career. Daniel just nodded and asked what came next. Spring came slowly that year, the way it does in towns near the water, cautiously, a degree at a time, testing the air before committing. On a Saturday morning in late April, I looked out the kitchen window and saw Daniel in the backyard. He was standing at the edge of the garden, our old winter garden, overgrown and neglected through everything, with a pair of work gloves on his hands and a quiet purposefulness about him that made me stop and simply watch. He didn't know I was there. He knelt down carefully, tested the soil with one hand, and began clearing away the dead growth from the season before, patient, methodical, making room for something new. I stood at that window for a long time. I thought about the harbor. I thought about that cold gray morning and my son standing on the pier telling me he didn't want revenge, he wanted truth. I thought about 7 years and everything they had held, the loss, the silence, the slow invisible erosion of a man I loved, and I thought about how none of it had managed in the end to take the essential thing. He was still here, still standing, still my son. I put my coat on and went outside and knelt down beside him without a word. He glanced over at me and smiled, a real one, unhurried and unguarded. We worked in the garden together until noon, and it was, without question, one of the finest mornings of my life. Before you go, I want to ask you something real. Not a trick question, not clickbait, something I actually think about. If you were Robert, if you were the father standing in that kitchen watching your son lay out 7 years of truth on a table, what would you have done differently? Would you have stayed as quiet as he did? Would you have stepped in sooner? Would you have been able to sit through that dinner the night before without saying a single word? Drop your answer in the comments, honestly. Because the people watching this channel are not passive people. You feel things deeply, you think things through, and your perspective matters more than you know. If you are not subscribed yet, fix that right now. Hit the button, turn on the bell, and make sure the next story finds you. Because we are just getting started. And the next one, I promise you, is going to hit even harder than this one did.